Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for joining us for the 22nd edition of the World Sustainable Development Summit, India's premier platform for deliberating the discourse around sustainability and climate change. My name is Ashmita, and I am a research associate with TERI, and I will be your MC for this proceedings. Before we commence the session today, a brief safety announcement during the event here at the Stein Auditorium. TERI is a health and safety and environment certified organization. In case of any untoward incident, like a fire evacuation is required, you are required to exit from this auditorium through the fire exit nearest to you without any panic. There are 7 exit gates at this auditorium, 4 at the ground floor, right, left, 2 main entrances. There is 1 exit at the stage, 2 exits in the balcony are at the entrances to the balcony. This session on instruments and leadership for inclusive green growth will be co-chaired by Ms. Kathleen McGinty, Vice President and Chief Sustainability Government Regulatory Affairs Officer from Johnson's Control, and Mr. Ajay Shankar, Distinguished Fellow, TERI. We're happy to have a distinguished line of speakers who need no introduction. On our panel today, we have Shri Sarbananda Sonowal, Honorable Union Cabinet Minister, Ministry of Ports, Shipping and Waterways, who will be joining us shortly. Ms. Gina Gund, Governor, Agder County, Norway. Her Excellency Ms. TERI Lehtinen, Deputy Minister, Ministry of Environment for Finland. Ms. Helen Clarkson, CEO of the Climate Group. Mr. Kartikeya Desai, Founder, Desai and Associates. Mr. Jagjit Singh Sareen, Principal, Dalberg Advisors. Mr. Abhinav Singh, Director of Amazon India. I now invite Ms. McGinty to conduct the proceedings of the session.
Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. Or should I say namaste? It's beautiful to be with all of you on a beautiful day and in this magnificent facility. Really, Habitat Center demonstrates for us what the beauties of sustainable development can really be and look like. As we start this second day, we are asked to tackle a big idea and a big question, and that is green growth. With that big topic, the experts tell us that there's a big number that goes along with it. So some of you may know this number, but there's a bit of a gap between what we all are digging deep and paying today to try to turn our economy in that green direction and where we really need to be. It's about a $4 trillion a year gap. Now, we have some government ministers here and government officials who will join us, and I'm just thinking, not too easy for government to just write $4 trillion a year. So we need government and the private sector to come together. Now, that $4 trillion can feel insurmountable. But having worked on climate issues for about 30 years now, another big number, I think we've never been as well situated to tackle the issue. The reason is, way back when, we would be honored to have environment ministers in those climate change negotiations, but we would look for, is there a finance minister? Is there someone on the investment side in terms of having interest in those proceedings? Today, when you come to a great gathering like this, or to the Conference of the Parties climate negotiations, you bet the environment ministers are there keeping everyone on track, but the finance minister is there, and the heads of central banks are there. Now, on the business interest, we always have been thrilled and privileged to have those who were pioneering in solar energy or wind energy coming and taking interest. But today, when you are in those negotiations, big industrialists, some of the biggest investment houses, bankers, and big tech is there as well. So we've never been better situated to figure out how we mobilize those financial resources. Question is, what are the best models? What are the best ideas? And that's what this panel will bring. Some of those best ideas start right here in India, where the government is to be congratulated, you probably have seen, entering into, as an early starter, in the green finance markets with the recent green bond that the government very successfully floated, accompanied by a very rigorous green finance framework to ensure transparency and complete visibility as to where the proceeds would be going, so we could be confident that those proceeds were going in a truly sustainable direction. We'll hear today from leaders from Europe as well. Europe absolutely pioneering with their CSRD coming forward and saying, you know what, our discussions and reporting on environmental data, we will hold you to the same standard as financial data. So environment is at that big table now. In the US, we're catching up, but as we like to say, the SEC is coming to ESG. And for those of us like Johnson Controls, where we work on building technology, we are all about sustainability, but we also like to say with the SEC coming to ESG, sustainability is coming from the basement of the building to the boardroom. That's game-changing stuff in terms of not only closing that $4 trillion gap, but bringing the initiative and the enterprise and the invention of all sectors of our society to change climate from a challenge to an opportunity. Last, I would just share with you, as we turn it over to the experts here, is one experience that Johnson Controls has had that I hope maybe some of our panelists can touch on as well. So as I said, we're a buildings company. We've been around 140 years. We do nothing but sustainable buildings technology. We are on a mission to tell people buildings are 40% of global greenhouse gas emissions. We got to decarbonize buildings. So we tried to be a pioneer in green finance, and we're proud to say we're the first industrial in the S&P 500 to put forward a sustainable finance framework, float a green bond, float a sustainable credit revolver, and float a sustainability-linked loan. Good news. We mobilized millions of dollars to bring to market the most efficient chiller in the world, running on not only a low but ultra-low GWP refrigerant. Challenge, very high barriers to entry. Lots of expense, lots of work to build the financial and environmental rigor that went in that. So question is, great model, how do we scale it? And I think in the leaders you'll hear from today, it's bringing those barriers to entry down while not sacrificing or compromising, but lifting the barrier in terms of ensuring it really is green. So speaking of green leaders, would you join me in welcoming to the podium Governor Gina Lund of Norway. Governor.
So thanks, first of all, to TERI and to Honorable Madam Vibha Dhawan for letting me have the chance to give a small address here today. We are discussing the largest of the crises on our earth. And Norway, like its fellow countries, is facing a climate and an environmental crisis. Human development has ended our natural areas, eroded them, and we are facing the loss of biodiversity and ecosystem services at an unprecedented rate. In Norway, local governments are the main spatial planning authorities in the country, each responsible for planning and developing their areas through local democracy. Therefore, sustainability efforts can be at the most impactful at local level. It is, however, at the regional and at the local level that we experience at most the conflict between universal accepted goals and legitimate local and individual interests. In our country, lack of political coherence and conflicts between local and national interest is a major challenge. My experience as county governor of the southern part of Norway, Agder, is that there are conflicting political goals that need to be clarified on a national level. It's laid out for local authorities, but we are seeing that it is a climate and environmental conflict, and new space-intensive development ambitions are not giving room for meeting our international goals. In the southernmost county of Norway, the coastline, with the most pleasant weather in Norway, I must say, I do feel this conflict daily. One of my main responsibilities are to make sure that municipalities comply with national politics and legislation set by Norwegian government and parliament. And this proves to be very difficult, as I'm also the recipient of lobbying and frustration from local and individual interest. It is not always that our international obligations are suiting the local priorities. I'll give some example. We all agree that we should transit from fossil fuel to renewable energy. In Norway, there is a strong emphasis on technological solution to solve the climate crisis. Almost 100% of Norway's electricity comes from hydropower. In my region, we currently have a huge surplus of storable, renewable energy. And this is a great advantage in the transition to a less carbon-intensive society. It also attracts energy-intensive businesses to the region and can create jobs and economic growth. However, these industries, which are also space-intensive, can put a heavy burden on our natural areas, like the carbon-rich wetland areas, our bogs, and our biodiversity in total. Case in point is, for example, battery production plants, which are rapidly emerging in Norway. These industries require large areas and may challenge the latest international agreements on nature conservation and the targets of Montreal Treaty. Finding suitable areas with the least negative impact in a situation where time to market is of vital importance for the industry, it is a challenge. All the new labor that the new industries generate are having an increased demand of housing. And the new inhabitants coming to our coastline, they all want to live in the most attractive areas, mostly at the ocean front. And this also leads to an increased pressure for construction in scarce and vulnerable areas along our coast. The municipalities, the local authorities, they want to attract the capital and these new inhabitants. And it's my task to make sure that the area restrictions that we are putting up for our coast are to be respected. Often, again, both the individual wishes and their local government's desires. We have developed several tools to be able to balance between growth and protection of the environment. First, the regional government of Agder has made a strategic plan, a roadmap for reaching the relevant sustainable development goals in our region. We have started in some of our municipalities with climate budgeting, meaning that in addition to the normal budgetary processes, we are putting up a column that the normal one will include the cost of different projects, but we also have a column that is putting points on only what are the emissions, how large will the emissions be. And that ensures that those who make decisions on a local level will be more aware and take larger responsibility for both the financial costs and the climate cost of each project. And this has shown to be a very effective tool to make it easy to find and implement the most cost-efficient measures for climate mitigations. We have also started at the coast a green purchasing and procurement, where local and regional authorities use their purchasing power to require goods, services, and labor that meet sustainability criteria and thus make the market towards sustainable solutions. A part of this practical tools and job is establishing a broad cooperation in our society. We have made this platform that we call Our Common Agder. Agder is the name of that south region. And we have established a forum of climate partners. This is an initiative to create a better social and environmental region, and we are having a broad involvement of relevant stakeholders from private sector, from public sector, research, and NGOs. Broad involvement and participation provide a thorough foundation for making well-informed, integrated decisions. And our climate partners has set up a loose network aimed specifically to develop new knowledge. Sustainable certification schemes is another tool. It's like we made it for work and life equality. And we made a project with Eco Lighthouse that focuses on all the 3 dimensions of sustainability and drives public and private organizations to take a more integrated approach. The certification schemes also provide a community and a network for those organizations that choose to be at the forefront of our green transition. There are also different tools like financial support schemes that the municipalities, businesses, and even the general public can apply for, like the climate support scheme that supports local climate measures and projects for reducing carbon emissions. One of the terms of this agreement is that municipality must share their experiences from this project. As a concrete result, we now have a database of over 1,400 different concrete projects that some of our municipality can look at for getting more inspiration. And a larger scheme is also made by the state-owned Enova for renewable and more efficient use of energy. To reach sustainable development goals, I believe it's vital that we at the regional level do our part. It is on the local level policies needs to be implemented. And that requires a combined and a coordinated effort with both the national and local level. From a regional level, we provide local knowledge and expertise to ensure that the best projects are selected and financed. We do this by guiding local and regional governments to balance the different interests, by providing knowledge and information and demanding high quality in their planning work, for example, in their impact assessment. Especially in development projects that requires large areas. I believe that we must ensure green growth and not more greenwashed grey industry. To reach the sustainable development goals, it is vital that measures are implemented at all governmental level, meaning we need to excel in dialogue and exchange experiences, both horizontally between administrative levels, local, regional, nationals, and vertically across sectors. We need to be more innovative and proactive, and we need to bravely do the prioritization on a solid foundation of knowledge. Thank you for your...
Wonderful. Thank you, Governor. Such great ideas and leadership. May I invite now Deputy Minister Lehtinen from the Environment Ministry of Finland. Minister?
Thank you. Distinguished ministers, colleagues, and friends. Let me start by thanking TERI for its outstanding work on policy research and mainstreaming sustainable development, both in India and globally. It is an honor to address this year's Sustainable Development Summit on the topic of ensuring inclusive green growth. I would also like to salute India for building its G20 presidency agenda around a Green Development Pact, focusing on circular economy, clean energy transition, and promoting behavioral change, a lifestyle of environment with individual and collective duty to live a life that is mindful and in tune with the planet. The urgency of action could not be more pressing. The world is still on a trajectory of rapid climate change. We are not on a track to limit average warming to 1.5 degrees. We have set in motion biodiversity laws at a scale of a new 6th mass extinction event. We are rapidly polluting the planet's oceans and freshwater resources, not to mention soils. So it gives us great hope that India has put these issues at the core of its G20 agenda. The Vision for India put forward yesterday by Amitabh Kant as the first country to industrialize without carbonizing the world is truly inspiring. In Finland, we have set in legislation a target to be climate neutral by 2035 and carbon negative soon thereafter, based on the advice of our best climate scientists of what is consistent and fair for Finland in respect of our commitment under Paris Agreement to pursue limiting warming to 1.5 degrees. Our electricity generation is already 85% CO2 emission free this year, and the figure should rise to about 95% this year. So currently 85, rising to 95. On our path towards climate neutrality, we are accelerating electrification of industry and transport and developing power-to-X solutions for the hard-to-abate sectors, steel industry, fertilizer production, and long-distance heavy transport. We welcome the race to green hydrogen economy, and as Mr. Kant yesterday, when he spoke about the India's assets of size, scale, and entrepreneurial spirit, he may be well right that India will beat us all to the green new hydrogen economy. Our facilitators put us the question what we would propose for the G20 Green Development Pact. In my view, it would be important that the leading economies commit to ending the use of fossil fuels in a manner that is just and fair, and removing harmful subsidies. I would also like to see a firm commitment to develop solutions for unlocking investments into clean, renewable energy, especially in the developing world. Greening the energy sector alone, however, will not be enough. We know that resource extraction is responsible for half of the world's carbon emissions and 80% of biodiversity loss. In order to ensure that a transition to climate neutral, nature positive society, a Green Development Pact will need to commit to move to a circular economy. Easier said than done, and in Finland we should know this, since we were perhaps one of the first or the first to develop our roadmap to circular economy in 2016. However, we are still far from having achieved this in practice. Circular economy is more than waste policy and recycling. It means a broad partnership and cooperation with different stakeholders to create an economy that thrives within planetary boundaries. It can create new jobs by promoting new business models in reuse and repair services and sharing economy. In Finland, to accelerate our circular economy transition, we have set quantitative targets on doubling resource efficiency and recycled content by 2035 and capping overall non-renewable resource consumption. Both societies and businesses have invested a lot in the current linear economy, so redesigning consumption and production requires rethinking both policy and business models. There are many policy options available to promote circular economy, many of them politically not easy. Taxes on virgin materials, shifting the tax burden from labor to resource use, waste taxes, for example. In Finland, we have implemented, for example, waste tax for landfilling and a ban on organic waste, including plastics, on landfills, property-specific minimum requirements for separate collection of paper, cardboard, glass, metal, plastic, bio-waste, and textiles, municipal waste fees based on type of waste, container size, and emptying frequency, producer responsibility for packages, papers, batteries, tires of motor vehicles, passenger cars, and also for certain single-use plastic items. We have very effective deposit-based return system for beverage packaging. We have end-of-waste enabling legislation, and we have green deals and voluntary agreements like plastic bag agreement, reduction of plastic waste in construction. In addition, we're in the process of developing new models of governance and cooperation to foster new industrial and sharing ecosystems. Needless to say, we need to make sure we leave no one behind. Important part of making sure the transition is fair and just is to assure proper consultation of all stakeholders in the decision-making, including indigenous peoples and youth. Colleagues, friends, we need to tackle the triple crisis of climate, biodiversity, and pollution together. We cannot afford to aggravate one when seeking to solve another. And we need to apply the principle of do no significant harm to all decisions. I would also like to echo Bruno Oberle from yesterday in highlighting the importance of entering G20 attention to finalizing the BBNJ negotiations and making swift progress on the plastics treaty. Finally, I would like to emphasize the essence of science-based policymaking, be it with regard to Green Development Pact or any other policy. Science policy interface is also at the core of TERI's valuable work. I'd like to thank TERI once more for bringing us all together for this important conversation to build common understanding on the urgency of action and provide solutions for the benefit of people and the planet. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you, Minister, for the vision and the details of how you get it done. Could I invite now Ms. Helen Clarkson, who is the CEO of the Climate Group, an organization that is really driving action as well. Helen, over to you.
Thank you, and let me add my thanks to TERI for inviting me here today and putting this panel together, and it's great to be here talking to you all. For those of you who don't know Climate Group, we're a non-profit organisation, and our mission is to drive climate action fast. That also leads to me talking quite fast, but I'll try and slow down. But I get very excited by the urgency of the problem that faces us. We've heard a lot already about national governments. What Climate Group does is bring together networks which have ambition at the centre, and we use that to engage markets and policymakers. And we do talk to national governments, but one of the networks that we bring together is the Under 2 Coalition, which is state and regional governments from around the world, about 200 governments, which together have GDP of about half the world's GDP is kind of included within the Under 2 Coalition, which is pretty exciting. So it's been named as the coalition around with the greatest potential for emissions reduction. And I think the word potential is important there because states and regions really hold a lot of the keys to unlocking this. We've already heard from Governor Lund how those national policies that are set at the top level, they really, come down to the ground at the local level. And one of the things I often talk about is how at the state and regional level, you get this real overlay between jobs and carbon emissions. And so for state governments, that's something they really have to think about as we think about things like the just transition. So while we're all looking at national governments, state and regional governments are increasingly stepping in and showing leadership. And the ambition should give support to national governments and also allow national governments to be more ambitious. So as India looks to 2070 and its ambition, it can really look to those states within the federal structure to enable some of that. So to ensure this and to make sure that some national actors are positioned to cater to local challenges and design policies and programs with that bottom-up approach, at Climate Group we've been working with states and regions to put a spotlight on best practices and climate leadership via strategic forums, tailored knowledge projects and peer-to-peer learning. And there are 7 states in India that are committed to the Under 2 MOU. And then we also work with more through something called the State Climate Fellows Programme, which is really around boosting the technical capacity of states. And I'm going to talk more about that technical capacity point, because as we think about finance, that becomes important. This week, we organised a roundtable for Indian states and philanthropies, and participants talked about how they have really good climate action plans now, but finance is really one of the key barriers, but also key opportunities for them on climate action. And they talked around things like forest-backed bonds, payment for ecosystem services, climate budgeting, emissions trading, and for states to be ready with bankable projects for philanthropies to support. So facilitating climate finance and diversifying the fiscal base for green growth should be absolutely a top priority. And it's increasing importance, we've heard this already, to governments at all levels around the world, because it's not just the national governments that are going to have that role in driving finance flows towards action. And we need more work to understand and develop the financial and fiscal tools that are available to states and regions. So we've been working with the support of Stiftung Makata on something called the Finance Fit for Change project, and this is starting to help us highlight those challenges for states and regions in terms of raising finance for climate action. And as I said, capacity building has really come out. It needs to be top of the agenda to deliver the transformational change needed. And we think that both national and subnational finance ministries really need to increase their capacity. So I want to get into some examples, because we talk capacity building things. Something like green budgeting. If you are going to deliver green budgeting effectively, you need that combination of both financial and climate and environmental policy expertise. And then if you think of something like carbon tax and carbon pricing, those sorts of instruments, they require really a high level of technical capacity to both measure and monitor emissions levels and then set up the appropriate infrastructure. Building regional political support on some green policy instruments will be key. Jurisdictional limitations and creditworthiness concerns can also be challenges, particularly when it comes to something like green bonds. And carbon pricing, which is basically making emitters pay for the right to emit greenhouse gases, either through tax or through an emissions trading scheme, can disproportionately impact low-income households if carbon pricing initiatives are not well designed. So most states and regions rely on international funding, and we found that states that are most successful in accessing those funds attribute that to a shared political commitment to making good use of them. But there are challenges here around access, eligibility requirements, and some of those are determined beyond the scope of the regional level. And this can be really unpredictable and unsupportive of long-term planning. So you start to see the challenges as you get into these quite technical instruments. And the other thing, as I mentioned before, where you have subnational governments, is they can find it more difficult and more challenging than, say, national governments to justify focusing their general revenue support on climate, which is seen as a national issue, when you compare with other developmental issues locally, such as health and education, and they've got to justify that to their electorate. So you get this real intersection of problems between things being set at the national level, but you've got to deliver those locally, which we're hearing from our politicians on the panel. So this is all a preview to a report that we're publishing in March, a comprehensive report on climate finance, where we want to take this holistic view of the challenges, gaps and opportunities for subnational governments, but also show that, opportunities is a key thing here. We know that things like horizontal collaboration, expanding commitments, building technical capacity can all come through as potential solutions. And with the Under 2 Coalition, we really want to work together and play a role facilitating that. And I mentioned the roundtable we had at the beginning of the week. I have to say the opportunities were probably more front of mind, actually, than the challenges. People are really excited to get going on this work, but it is going to be hard work. So challenging times, really excited to see India, its G20 program coming together. The states here in India, we know, are really ready to support and implement that, and we're really excited to work with them and to work with you in delivering. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you, Helen. And let me invite Mr. Desai and Associates. Oh, it's terrific. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. It's really a pleasure to be here. And first of all, I'd just like to thank TERI and Mrs. Dhawan for this opportunity. And what a wonderful gathering of 3 days and, talking about these absolutely critical issues. I'm going to focus on the issue of climate finance, which is my specialization. Actually, it's social finance, and that is what I want to focus on. How do we bring social inclusion back into the heart of climate finance? And that specifically relates to the funding that's needed to be unlocked for adaptation. His Excellency Dr. Jabbar mentioned yesterday that that's one of the key targets, right, of doubling adaptation finance. So how do we really go about doing this? What I wanted to say was that this is very much possible. And the way to think about this is the different segments of climate finance. When we look at social finance, we talk about 5 or 6 different segments. From the left, you think about greater impact, and on the right, greater financial returns. So if you'll permit me, I can just walk you through those segments. It starts with public finance. Governments, by definition, are fully concessional. Then philanthropy/venture philanthropy. Then you have blended finance, which by definition is muted returns, right? Then impact investing, which is venture capital. And then you start to get towards more market return-based investing, ESG, SRI, and climate finance, which is very much market-based, and that's fantastic. So that has actually brought billions of dollars, into the system. But adaptation needs a combination of environmental objectives and social objectives. So there's a lot of potential in bringing capital at that venture philanthropy end, where the returns are not always going to be market risk adjusted. So there's a lot of tools which people talk about, and broadly blended finance can be thought of in 2 buckets. One is results-based financing, which is essentially where you're paying for outcomes, and there the real potential is in crowding in private capital and having philanthropic capital pay that back based on the achievement of an outcome. And the second category is what you may call concessional finance, or risk mitigation, which is really about leverage. So these basic concepts, are very much there as part of the development finance community, but I feel that, they can very much be applied to unlock climate finance. Let's just look at the data really quickly, right? So they say that $650 billion is like the total money in the system, climate finance, in 2019-20. In terms of the sources, a third of that, 210 billion, comes from development finance institutions, 130 from private commercial financial institutions, banks and such, 125 from corporations, and actually 55 billion from households. So the DFI bit is large, it's 1/3, it's development focused. In terms of the uses of that, I think 580 billion goes to mitigation, which is great. Only 65 billion is going to adaptation, plus dual, so that's the gap. And you can see that in the instruments. The vast majority of climate finance, $350 billion, is in debt, either project or balance sheet based, or equity, 200 billion. So 550 of 650 is there. And the balance is 30 billions of grant and 60 billion of low-cost debt, right? So again, that inclusive aspect is needed. Greater climate philanthropy for the inclusive aspects of work can unlock greater commercial finance. And look at the potential. In terms of the actual need that's been estimated, it's been at roughly 250 billion. I'll just take a pause here. Namaste. Please. Welcome, Minister. Thank you. Welcome, Minister. So just coming back to this issue of climate finance and how it can be unlocked, the point I was making was that the total need for adaptation finance has been estimated at 250, and the existing availability is $50 billion. So just $200 billion per year can actually be unlocked. So it's very much a doable thing. That was the first point I quickly wanted to make. Secondly, in terms of its application in the Indian context, we know that globally, most of the finance goes towards renewable energy, transportation, and buildings. But interestingly, in the Indian context, the need is more sort of spread out. The biggest use case is actually sustainable land, 30%, followed by renewable energy, another 30%, then urban infrastructure, then electric transport. These are all roughly 20, 30%. So the need for climate finance is not just in renewable energy, but in these other sectors as well. And then, of course, generation and demand efficiency. So, finally coming to the use, what are these blended finance tools and constructs that we're talking about beyond the traditional climate bonds? So one is end user financing. Think about hundreds of millions of rural people who are accessing solar products or clean cook stoves or a range of environmentally conscious products, financing that through microfinance and other banks. That creates huge, last mile impact. Climate tech venture capital investing. Very less money goes into that. Large VC investing into, electric mobility companies and inclusive tech VC investing. So on a relative basis, that's very small. Philanthropy. Climate philanthropy can be used, let's say in steel. JSW Steel, one of our largest companies, has done a green bond to transition and decarbonize. But there's a lot of smaller SMEs, steel foundries in Agra and so forth, who could benefit from a smaller facility, as small as $10, $15 million, to help them adopt those technologies. Philanthropy can support that. In regenerative agriculture, there are development impact bonds, where a large number of farmers can be encouraged to grow bamboo in a sustainable way, which is then procured by private corporations like IKEA for furniture. So these are some of the examples of, what is the potential of blended finance. And I just wanted to conclude by saying, what are the three things which are needed to actually make this happen? The first is to bring in commercial capital. We have to accept that commercial investors have their risk-return investment criteria. So we have to create the appropriate pricing to allow them to underwrite, and that is precisely what philanthropy allows. Philanthropy creates that de-risking that brings in the commercial capital, but philanthropy needs impact metricization and accountability. So with the green taxonomy standards that the government is working on with different impact metrics, that really helps. So the second thing is to bring in philanthropy through impact metrics. And the final point is to reduce the cost complexity, improve the templatization. Intermediation costs are still too high. This is where regulation comes in, the standards that the government sets. So in conclusion, I wanted to say that even though it seems very scary, it's absolutely possible to tackle adaptation financing by leveraging the principles of social finance. India is the country best positioned to do so, and frankly, where the need is the greatest. And once again, thank you very much to the organizers, to TERI, for bringing us all together and encouraging this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Desai. Incredibly creative ideas. And now I have the pleasure of inviting our chief guest, the Honorable Union Cabinet Minister, Minister Sonowal, Minister of Ports, Shipping, and Waterways. Sir, we'd be honored to have your address.
Respected Madam Gina Lant, Honorable Governor, Agra country, Norway. Respected Madam TERI Lehtonen, Honorable Deputy Minister, Ministry of Environment for Finland Leadership Addresses. Respected Madam Helen Clarkson, CEO, the Climate Group Special Remarks. Respected Karti Kaya Desai, Founder Desai and Associates. Respected Jagjit Singh Sarenji, Principal Dalbark Advisors. respected Abhinav Singh ji, Director, Amazon India, Co-Chair, Madam Kathleen McGinty, Vice President and Chief, Sustainability, Government and Regulatory Affairs, Officers, Junction Controls, respected Ajay Shankarji, Distinguished Fellow, TERI, and ladies and gentlemen, today we are all assembling here for a very, very noble cause. The causes concern the global society, and I believe we'll have to play a very, very responsible role in the future to come in the climate action sector. To keep the greenery intact, the environment and ecology survive, for the survival of mankind and for the survival of living organisms on the planet Earth. It is a matter of great pleasure for me to be part of the Energy and Resources Institute annual flagship event, the World Sustainable Development Summit. As a research institution working steadfastly to find solutions that will make the planet more sustainable, not only through their work on policy, but also through technology intervention that will enable green transition. TERI holds a vital place in the green growth ecosystem. The Ministry of Ports, Shipping and Waterways recently joined hands with TERI to set up the country's first National Center of Excellence in Green Port and Shipping at the institution's field station at Goal Pahari. This National Center of Excellence brings together the expertise of the Dindal Port Authority, Paradip Port Authority, and Bhio Sidam Baranar Port Authority, and Cochin Shipyard Limited, and TERI, and will play a key role in developing regulatory framework and alternate technology adoption roadmap for green shipping in India. As inclusive green growth increasingly becomes the foundation on which future development has to take place, it is imperative to bring in policies, frameworks, and systems in place that will enable this transition. Excuse me. The shipping sector is both energy and resource intensive and needs an implementation roadmap to achieve energy and resource neutrality. Initiatives such as NCO EGPS will provide decision makers at national and sub-national level with methodology and framework to implement carbon neutrality measures and to meet the obligation under the Paris Accord. At present, about 99% of the energy demand from coastal shipping sector is met by fossil fuel. With fuel oil and marine gas oil, as per IMO, an unsafe measure may take GHG emissions associated with the shipping sector to anywhere between 50% and 250% by 2050 in comparison to 2008 emission level. The IMO overall vision adopted in 2018 is to phase out greenhouse gas emission from the industry as soon as possible in this century. In line with the IMO's objective, the Ministry of Port Shipping and Waterways has set target to reduce GHG emission in Indian shipping sector to 30% by 2030. Major air pollutant generated by port activities include carbon monoxide, volatile organic compounds, and nitrogen oxide, sulfur oxide, and particulate matter. Various pollution mitigation measures are under place by the Indian major ports, such as adoption to mechanized mode of dry bulk handling, increasing green belt coverage, conversions of diesel RTGCs to electric hybrid RTGCs, and several others. Further, the role of NCO EGPS will be transformational in achieving Vision 2030 pollution mitigation target. It is critical to develop a roadmap for greening the shipping sector in India, reduce pollution intensity, and evolved strategies to introduce renewable energy and green hydrogen in the shipping sector. With green growth being a priority area in the Union budget presented in Parliament a few days ago, the focus is firmly on meeting the decarbonization target for 2030 as well as the net zero goals for 2070. This is applicable to the shipping sector as well. The budget had also put forth the need to promote coastal shipping as an energy efficient and lower cost mode of transport, both for passengers and freight, through PPP mode with viability gap funding. With India taking over the G20 presidency this year and working groups deliberating on clean energy and green transitions, we are re-emphasizing the significance of inclusive green growth as our development strategy. To enable this growth, we need to pay particular attention to technology transfer, which is absolutely essential for green transition. There is also a need to mainstream green transition policies as well as carry out proper assessment of emerging energy and fuel sources. A green shipping sector is the most pivotal element in evolving a sustainable blue economy. A thriving blue economy needs a shipping sector that cuts back on emission and opts for green fuel. With our multiple initiatives, the ministry is looking forward to decarbonize the sector so that 2030 and 2070 targets are achieved. So with these words, I again like to reassert this particular view that we are to put our 100% to keep our environment pollution free. So to achieve that target, whatever initiative in this kind of making the globe very much comfortable for the comfortable survival of the living organism, I believe in this particular sector we'll have to always get united in the principle of one earth, one family, one future. This is the way we'll have to, get our commitment integrated and also put our best possible effort. Whatever policy and program will be sucked out in the near future, if it is to be implemented with letter and spirit, with full of dedication, devotion, commitment, honesty, and kind of discipline and decency, I believe this planet Earth, the family surviving on this planet Earth is going to live very comfortably for future to come. With these few words, I have seen some of the brightest students also, I believe, present here. And particularly, you are the future generation, and you have a big responsibility to soldier this kind of initiative in the near future. And I believe always we should keep in our mind that this beautiful, kind of nature and beautiful kind of planet Earth, its topography, its geography, its all kind of natural existence is meant for us. We must understand that. Because this nature is meant for the creature. Let all the creature living on planet Earth help in the promotion of biodiversity. So, in this particular sector, I believe we, the human being, will be more concerned, because there is a kind of observation that all the creature created by God, they're the promoter of biodiversity. But there is only one creature, very much dangerous for the, it is always considered to be the biggest degrader of biodiversity. So that is why this language we must understand and try to interpret what is in it, and what is the appeal in it, what is the message in it. That is why today's this particular occasion is really very, very meaningful occasion. And we, the people of this planet Earth, let us work together to achieve the target, whatever we are aiming for. With these few words, I conclude. Jai Hind.
Thank you, Honorable Minister, for that vision and those very inspirational words and your incredible leadership. Let me invite now my colleague here, and Mr. Sorin of Dahlberg Associates. Thank you again, Minister.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the organizers, TERI, for inviting me to share some thoughts. I feel particularly privileged to be speaking before you today, having started my climate career at TERI only about 16, 17 years back. Let me acknowledge the inspiring state of address which honorable ministers have given, especially Minister Sonowal, articulating very well India's vision for G20 and how different ministries and sectors of economy are coming together for achieving the near-term and long-term targets. As we think about India's proposal for a Green Development Pact, we are all reminded of the world we are living in, a long shadow of COVID, high inflation, ongoing conflict, high food prices, high fuel prices, high fertilizer prices. Within that, we had successful biodiversity COP, we had successful climate COP, and most of the corporates are steaming ahead with their climate, with their sustainability, with their ESG work to mainstream all these agendas. As Kathy said, SEC is moving to ESG, which is a welcome sign. So is the Fed, so is the ECB, so is all other institutions across the globe, including RBI, SEBI in India. So let me offer some thoughts on the 5 pillars for the Green Development Pact and how best to weave a thread through all of these. As we look to implementing circular economy concepts into production cycles, into consumption cycles, and finally disposal cycles and the feedback loop, these should not become binding constraints or competitive advantages of one country's versus other. And a link to this would be the carbon border adjustment mechanisms and other such progressive restrictions, I would call it. So what in our view, Green Development Pact should bring the G20 members together on a climate competitiveness framework or principles, where every country is in a positive race rather than a negative race in which restrictions in one country reduce the economic growth of other countries. Given all the G20 economies are linked to or joined to the hip on trade, more than 50% of the GDPs, including this country, is dependent on trade. Let me now come to climate finance. Our recommendation would be to expand the scope of climate finance and make climate smart transition of financial sector overall. We need, as we know from various speakers underlining it, we need trillions of dollars. Climate finance is a sliver of the overall scale, shift, and optimization of financing we are talking about. So I think given the heft of G20 countries, about 85 or 90% of the global GDP and the levers they have, I think quickly they should shift from the narrow band of climate finance, which is very, very important given Copenhagen, given climate finance, given UN negotiations, but expand it to climate smart transition of financial sector. And that's where ESG, that's where disclosures, new capital, climate tech becomes very, very important. Let me now quickly say a few things on SDG enhancements, especially linked to G20 is the resilient infrastructure. And Minister Sonowal, you again mentioned about making port and shipping infrastructure climate resilient. But for developing economies, I think Green Development Pact could go even further, saying let's build infrastructure which enhances our resilience rather than enhancing the resilience of the infrastructure we have already built. So it's a much more progressive agenda, much more forward-looking agenda, and internalizing the growth imperatives alongside the resilience and climate imperatives. Let me quickly say a few words before I conclude on how we go about internalizing all these elements at the subnational level. Actually, action happens at subnational level, at the state level, at the municipality levels, but the reality is the state capacity is also weak there. The financial ability of municipalities and states are not able to cope with the massive transition we expect of them. So our suggestion is that in this Green Development Pact, there should be a commitment by all G20 countries, also reflecting voices of the South, to enhance the state capacity. And here I'm referring to enhancing the capacity of civil servants who make policy, who implement policy, working with stakeholders across the board to enhance their capacity on climate transition overall, internalizing all the issues we've discussed this morning. Similarly, for financing, I think a lot to be done to enhance the capacity of municipalities, states, to bring together a green financing package for all the things we expect them to do. The capacity is weak, but the opportunity is also high to transform their balance sheets into green balance sheets. We have seen recent or last two budgets from federal government in India giving a very strong signal on energy and climate transition, allocating billions of dollars. It's a good start, but I think in coming years we will see much more internalization of these agendas in hardcore financial allocations as we move forward. Finally, in terms of what we are doing, I've been in public sector and public financial institutions about 18 years and made a shift to private sector consulting with a view that climate transition has now become so strategic that people, corporates, governments, foundations are all paying to the management strategy consulting firms the big dollars to help them change very, very quickly. So, colleagues, what I'm suggesting here is this is already becoming very, very mainstream. It is hitting the bottom line, which is a good news, but a lot to be done so that state capacity is supportive of the big transition we are talking about. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Serene. It's wonderful to hear that hands-on perspective. And now if I might ask our colleague from Amazon to deliver your remarks, sir, please, Mr. Singh.
Thank you. Good morning, distinguished guests. It's quite an honor to be here today, and I'd like to thank TERI for giving us this opportunity. I personally, and especially at Amazon, we believe that sustainable development and climate resilience are crucial for a better tomorrow. This is quite in sync with our government's goals here in India. And quite honestly, the goals are applaud-worthy and demonstrate a true resolve to lead climate action. We heard earlier today that there is a need for there not to be a trade-off between economic growth and climate action. and the government taking goals like 50% installed power capacity through renewable energy by 2030, launch of LIFE, which is a citizen-centric initiative to make sure that we build sustainable lives here in India, are truly inspirational. At Amazon, we take our responsibility very seriously. We know that we play our role in building a low-carbon future for our communities, our customers, our sellers, and of course, our employees. We made a very public commitment to this. In 2019, we co-founded the Climate Pledge. We committed that by 2040, we would be net zero carbon, 10 years ahead of the Paris Accord. I'm very happy to report that we have 400 signatories to the Climate Pledge now, and we count among them a lot of companies in India, to name a few: Infosys, HCL, Tech Mahindra, and a lot many others. From a clean energy perspective, it can't be done by any one organization or the government alone. It needs collective action. And in order to make a transition to clean energy, over the last 1 year itself here in India, we've announced 6 utility-scale projects. These renewable energy projects represent 920 megawatts of clean energy, taking our global clean energy footprint to 20 gigawatts. With this, we set the record for the most renewable energy purchase by a company in any year. But apart from these big initiatives, we try to make sure that our operations are self-sustaining in many big and small ways. As an example, all of our operations from a warehousing perspective are largely self-sustaining with solar roofs, which together generate about 19.7 megawatts of energy, and we have these installations on 41 facilities across the length and breadth of India. These efforts, of course, are in line with the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy's solar hybrid policy that aims to build a future where we have stable and reliable renewable supply to the grid. From an industry perspective, what could be done more? A stable and uniform policy framework which would allow the industry to invent and allow the industry to move to renewable energy in a meaningful way. We spoke about energy. Moving on to transportation, which is a significant part of moving towards a world where there's low carbon emissions, we are proud partners of Shunya, which is a Government of India initiative to enable electrification of urban deliveries as well as ride-hailing. In line with that, in 2020, we had announced that by 2025, we will have 10,000 electric vehicles in our fleet. I'm very proud to report that we'll not only meet, but beat that goal of 10,000 electric vehicles. And all of this has been done with OEMs right here in India. We've worked with large OEMs like the Tata Group, Ashok Leyland, and others, as well as small startups to invent 2-wheel, 3-wheel, and 4-wheel variants, which will help us make our delivery fleet completely electric. What we could do more in this space is, again, a stable infrastructure and policy framework. We spoke about green growth, or we started the session talking about green growth. India's growth trajectory has been simultaneously inspiring and something to be really proud of. E-commerce has played a role in that, in developing digital infrastructure and enabling access of goods and services to every single postcode in India. At Amazon, over the last 10 years, it's been amazing to see, starting from 100 sellers, we now have digitized over 10 lakh sellers on the e-commerce ecosystem. We've taken a bold goal of digitizing 10 million MSMEs, enabling $20 billion of exports and creating 2 million jobs by 2025. Throughout this growth, which is meteoric in its own right, we have continued to decarbonize our network. We spoke about energy and electric vehicles. Another critical aspect that we have worked on is our packaging. As an Amazon customer, and I hope all of you are Prime customers, when you get packages, you would have realized differences over the last few years. We've used machine learning to be able to find the optimal size of packages that could fit the product that we are shipping so that the product comes to you safely and we don't use too much packaging. Over the last few years, we've been able to reduce the weight of our packaging by 38%, which enables a lower carbon footprint from our fulfillment centers to your doorsteps. You would have seen that the plastic tapes we used to use a few years back have been replaced by paper tapes. We moved away from single-use plastic completely. We moved away from plastic mailers to paper mailers. So in every aspect of our packaging, not only what we send from our fulfillment centers, but we also work with vendors and suppliers to be able to make our packaging more sustainable. We're also working on an initiative which we call package-free shipping, where we send goods from our fulfillment centers all the way to customers in reusable containers so that there is no need of packaging at all. Not only is it frustration-free, but it is incredibly good for the environment. I'd like to conclude by re-emphasizing what the Honorable Minister just spoke about. Addressing climate change requires a virtuous cycle. It starts with a bold commitment, goes on to investment, and then deliberate action, and is not just by an organization or the government, but at all levels of society. I'm certain that together we can and will create a better tomorrow. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Singh, and that too was a wonderful summary of the action and vision we've heard here. Let me ask my dear friend and colleague, Mr. Shankar, Distinguished Fellow at TERI, to wrap us up.
We are running a little ahead behind schedule, so this was supposed to be a session for discussion. So I think I'll leave the floor open for 4 questions, but only questions, no comments, please. And then some people on the panel may like to respond. So do I see any hands anywhere? Yeah, one there. Yeah.
There's one gentleman over here.
Yeah, and there is a gentleman over there, so, but very short questions, no comments at all.
Hi everyone, I'm Anshul Gautam. I'm from Himachal Pradesh, state in India. And my question is to Mr. Abhinav. Wonderful speech, very calm and composed. However, I want to ask that you mentioned about the electric vehicles, right? And you also mentioned about the advancements that you're doing in Amazon with respect to climate action. So, sir, regarding to delivery systems, are you also working in that respect and including electrical vehicles there? So that's my question.
Okay, somebody that side, please.
Hello, Mr. Abhinav. Our family is a big consumer of Amazon.
Question.
Sadly, yes, that is the question, sadly. A few years back, we had a dustbin of 12 liters for the whole family. And now we have upgraded it to 100-liter bucket. And even then, the package is often spillover. I wrote to Amazon for this reusable thing, so that somebody delivers the item and takes back the packaging. But there was no reply.
Okay. Anybody else? Yeah, one more.
Here.
I'll take 2 more.
Ajay, you see?
I have a question regarding the climate finance itself. So as we talk about the climate finance, it is very beneficial to central level and the government level. But can we think that it is very beneficial for the local participation, the local level? Can it be reached there, the climate finance?
Okay. Any more, and that will be the last question. Yeah. Please. Please.
I have a question to the Honorable Minister Sonowal, and I'd like to ask, since you're concerned with shipping and waterways, what is being done for protection of the marine life? Protection of marine life, I'd like to ask. Thank you.
I think Amazon could answer the questions over tea break. May I request the ministers to answer, the minister to answer, and Minister Sonowal, please. Could you repeat your question, please?
In this particular sector, whatever, we have the guidelines to protect the marine life is all being adopted in the system. Like even in the recent past in the river cruise, we have installed the device like dolphin deterrent device in the vessel itself, so that no marine life is lost in the proceeding of the vessels. So this is how oil spill matters has also been specially taken care of, so that no spill of oil is falls in the kind of sea, so that marine life get affected. So this kind of initiative, all the concerned agencies, state government and state agencies, government of India, we all work together so that no loss of life to the marine is caused. Thank you.
And the last word to you on how to increase climate finance.
Sure.
The question at the local level, and I'll supplement it. How do we take it to a multiple of 5, the present level of climate finance?
No, absolutely. I think many examples you heard today, multiple speakers spoke about how the finance is at an international, national, state, and municipal level. It's certainly happening. I spoke about end-user finance. Many people are realizing that parastatals and state governments have the capacity to implement a lot of schemes. And I just give one example at the municipal level in social impact bonds, development impact bonds. This is an example in healthcare. A private investor, this is in Pimpri Chinchwad in Maharashtra, adjacent to Pune, to develop a healthcare infrastructure. So the private sector comes, finances the development of private healthcare facilities, and if they meet a certain standard, then the municipality pays the private investor back. So in certain areas, this is very suitable. Think about waste management. The Department of Municipal Administration, DMA, in Maharashtra, which represents many of the smaller cities, right? They also are interested in this, that how do you implement private sector waste management solutions and have the municipality pay for that, for which, of course, the municipality needs bonds. Many municipalities are raising green bonds. So it's very much happening, and it's also happening through the NGO and philanthropic sector on a grassroots basis. And that's precisely the point. That's exactly the type of climate finance that's needed, not just these billion-dollar commitments at the corporate level. Those are also, of course, very welcome, and no one is against that. But you need this at a more decentralized level.
Thank you. And a minute to Apple.
Thank you for your indulgence. And I will answer more questions over tea if needed. So to your question, are we looking to do that in the delivery fleet? Absolutely. We have thousands of electric two-wheel vehicles already in our fleet. We continue to increase that number, and we continue to enable our delivery partners to source financing so that they're able to buy their own electric vehicles and then become self-sufficient. To your question, sir, I spoke about the amount of work we are doing in packaging to make it more sustainable, right from working with our sellers and vendors to making sure that we use machine learning and paper a lot more. The problem that you called out, which is circular economy, is certainly something that we are seized of. It's a hard problem to solve. How do you make it a reliable experience for the customer? How do you make sure that you then recycle what you pick up in a meaningful way? We're certainly seized of it, and it's something that we will get done just in the process.
My privilege to thank all our panelists, especially the Honorable Minister, for his inspiring comments. And I hope the organizers will bear with us for having overshot a bit on time. So our tea break could be a bit shorter. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of TERI and the WSDS Secretariat, we thank all our esteemed speakers for a thought-provoking discussion and everyone who's joined us today. The Group A thematic tracks will be beginning simultaneously at 11:30 a.m. Refreshments will be served at the respective halls. Please proceed to the designated halls. Thank you and have a good day.